Hey folks, see if you've ever had this problem. You're trying to eat a little healthier, but you're in the grocery store aisle, you're looking at packaging, nutrition labels, and they're so confusing, you don't know what's good for you and what's not. Well, this is why I love Thrive Market, my go-to online grocery store for getting all of my healthy essentials delivered, and I don't even have to leave my couch. Finding better options for the whole family is easy with Thrive Market's Healthy Swap Scanner. Just scan a product and it instantly recommends healthier swaps. This is how my wife and I found our new favorite snack, IQ bars. Sometimes I eat one in the morning with my coffee, sometimes just later on in between meals. They also have so many on-site filters that make it simple to shop by the needs of everyone in the family. Maybe you have someone who needs gluten-free food, somebody that has a peanut allergy. Well, no more scouring ingredient labels when you can just filter it all on Thrive Market. My wife and I often use the high protein filter to stock up on things like Sieti chips. Ready to make the switch? Go to thrivemarket.com/TCAT for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/TCATT. thrivemarket.com/TCAT. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 330 of the True Crime All the Time podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Man, I'm doing good. 330 episodes.
I know, it's kind of hard to believe, isn't it?
It really is.
You know, it's also hard to believe the story that I told on Patreon about breaking another toilet seat that's in the exact same spot 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Lived in this house 20 years, never broke a toilet seat.
That's a problem.
I don't understand it.
I had nothing to do with it.
I think you might have weakened it at the very, very least. Hey, let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Deanna Lori Stock.
Hey, Deanna.
Anna Brennan jumped out at her highest level.
Thank you, Anna.
Susan Hubner.
Hey, Susan.
Hannah Kate Tomlin.
What's going on, Hannah Kate?
Mandy B jumped out at her highest level.
Oh, awesome, Mandy.
Shelby Rose Petro.
Hey, thank you, Rose Petro.
Lori De Laurentiis.
Hey, De Laurentiis.
Will Barretto.
What's going on, Will?
Samantha Jane.
Hey, there's Samantha.
Holly Tapley.
I appreciate that, Holly.
Stuart Brown.
Hi there, Stuart.
Jamie Stewart.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie.
Jessica Thompson.
Hi, Jessica.
Jennifer Reed.
Hey, Jennifer.
Melinda Brabant.
What's up, Brabant?
Kanisha King.
Thank you, Kanisha.
Susan Vickery.
Hey, Susan.
Trouble Ice.
Oh, man, don't be trouble.
Nakia.
Hey, Nakia.
Tracy Miles jumped out at our highest level.
You're awesome, Tracy.
And last but not least, Lauren Burris.
Hey, Burris.
So we appreciate that new support. And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Gretchen Hereford.
Hey, thank you, Gretchen.
Yeah, we appreciate that long-term support as well. We also had great PayPal donations from Vivian Lohr.
Hey, Vivian.
And Sarah Williams.
Oh, thank you, Sarah.
Gibbs, we have so much out right now. We have a Patreon episode that dropped Saturday night on Richard Valenti. This is a man who murdered a number of girls, sexually assaulted a number of girls in South Carolina.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s. We also have an episode out on Unsolved where we're discussing the disappearance of Brian Kletcha.
Yeah, we're headed down to Florida. We're going to look into the case. We're in southern Florida. And, he moves in with his boyfriend and some other roommates, and things get a little messy. Strange. And so we're kind of looking into that, but he gets up and leaves one morning, never to be heard of or seen again. So we're kind of chase those down.
Okay. Yep. Check it out. All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time?
I am ready.
In January 2017, 34-year-old Julii Johnson was shot outside her boyfriend's home in Warren, Michigan. Like many cases, her boyfriend was a suspect at first, but the police found evidence that indicated it was actually his ex-girlfriend and 2 other men who were involved in the murder. And I think I've said it before, but I actually lived in Warren, Michigan.
You did, yeah.
My wife and I did for about 3 or 4 years before we had kids. I lived right on the border of Warren and Sterling Heights. I think it was like 12 mile, 13 mile. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was about 3 miles from M&M. That's all I remember.
Is that
3 or 4 miles.
Okay. Just down the road.
Just down the road. Julii Johnson was born on August 25th, 1982. She was originally from Oak Park, Michigan. At the time of her death, she had a teenage daughter. Julii's great aunt told 7 Action News that she was a hardworking single mother who will be greatly missed by family, friends, and the community. Julii had been in a relationship with a man named Jim Terrell Lattner for about 2 years. Some sources list his name as James Lattner, and it seems like he was commonly referred to as Terrell Lattner. Lattner was convicted of possession of a controlled substance in 1997 and cocaine and heroin possession with intent to deliver in 2003. He was released from prison in 2010 after the second conviction and was on lifetime probation at the time of Julii's death, according to Michigan Department of Corrections records.
Man, I want to believe that Michigan was that one of the states that had the 3 strikes and you're out when it came to drugs.
I know it at one point, a lot of the states had it. I don't know how many. California, I think, was the one that really put the hammer down when it came to drugs and stuff. Michigan might have been one of those as well, but you've got a couple of convictions. So when you get the second conviction and it's cocaine, it's heroin with the intent to deliver. Now, my question is, how does that differ from intent to distribute? Because you see that a lot as well.
Yeah.
My thought is deliver, you're handing it off to one person.
Right.
Distribute, you're handing it out to a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, maybe you're just the mule on the deliver part.
Maybe, I don't know. But he got 7 years, or he did 7 years, and lifetime probation.
That's rough, man.
That is rough.
Hey, if you're not going to get any more trouble, it's no big deal.
Yeah, if you walk the straight and narrow,
yeah, you're good.
Shouldn't be a problem. Before his relationship with Julii, Terrell Lattner was in a relationship with a woman named Marcie Griffin for 17 years. According to the Oakland Press, they had 2 children together. Marcie was angry over his relationship with Julii, and she sent derogatory text messages to him about Julii. She also criticized him for not doing more for his children, according to the Royal Oak Tribune. And these texts, and we'll talk about them more as we move along, they would be a very important part of the murder case. At the time of her arrest, Marcie Griffin was in a relationship with a 58-year-old man named George Ryder. Julii lived with Terrell and his teenage son at the Stone Ridge at Heritage Village subdivision near 13 Mile and Mound in Warren, Michigan. I'm telling you, man, I don't know where that is exactly, but it can't have been far from where my wife and I live.
Yeah. It's ringing true to you, these street names.
It absolutely is. Julii often visited her mother in Oak Park, and she did so the night before her murder. It was her mother's birthday. Jocelyn Johnson told WDIV4 that she thanked Julii for her birthday present and told her she loved her. Now, we know that this woman is going to be murdered, right? We said it up front. When you hear, something like this, you hear a mother kind of recounting the last conversation. Number one, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But number two, you have to believe that conversation gets etched in your mind for the rest of your life because of what
the
circumstances around it are. You're never going to forget those last words that you said to your daughter. Around 7:30 a.m. on January 13th, 2017, Julii Johnson was shot outside Terrell Lattner's condo as she was leaving for work. WXYZ Detroit reported that she was in the driveway opening the passenger side door of her car when she was shot. She was found on the front lawn next to her vehicle. She had been shot 7 times, once in the forehead and multiple times in the torso. She was pronounced dead at the hospital.
That's really gruesome, to be shot in the head and then also multiple times in the torso.
And in the forehead.
Yeah.
So, that tells me that somebody's in front of you, right? They're looking at you.
They are.
Pulling the trigger. You can't shoot somebody in the forehead from behind.
They want you to know who's doing this.
Now, Terrell Lattner was inside the house at the time of the shooting, and he called 911 after he heard gunshots. According to Julii's mother, he heard Julii say, "Oh God," and saw a boy with a hoodie running down the street. A neighbor also saw someone running away from the area just after the shooting. The neighbor described the person as wearing a gray hooded jacket, which matched what Lattner was wearing that morning. The neighbor later said she thought the shooter was younger than Lattner. So obviously this is going to come in where he becomes a suspect and all of that. But I want to talk about, you're living in a neighborhood, houses all around. Now it's 7:30 in the morning. So presumably a lot of people are still home, getting ready for work or whatever.
Drinking their coffee.
I'm still in bed, but most people are probably up. A whole bunch of gunshots ring out. That's going to be pretty hard to mistake.
It is.
If it's one shot, you hear people sometimes say, well, is that a car backfire or something like that? Maybe it's not discernible 100% as a gunshot. You hear 7 of them in a row,
you're going to know.
There's no doubt
that
somebody is firing a gun. And whether they should or not, I think a lot of people are going to come outside to see what's going on.
Yeah.
I know there's been many times where I hear gunshots and the first thing I do is walk outside, kind of look around. Is that a smart thing to do? I don't know.
Probably not, but
Yeah, but that's what I do. Now, it's a good thing here that somebody did because they got a description. If they, did a Chuck Norris barrel roll over their couch and hid behind it, then you wouldn't get that.
Yeah.
The police searched Terrell Lattner's condo and the surrounding neighborhood on the day of the shooting. A police canine tracked a scent away from the condo, but then the trail led back in the direction of the condo. So again, if you're talking about things that are going to put you on the suspect list.
Yeah.
Number one, you have a witness who says that the shooter was wearing essentially what you were wearing.
Yep. Not good.
And then this canine is tracking away from your condo, but then back to it.
Yeah. Like you ran away to be like a different person, but somehow found yourself back to the condo.
According to forfeiture documents filed in federal court on October 16th, 2017, investigators found $533,252 inside Lattner's condo.
That's a lot of moolah.
Yeah. I mean, that's about what you carry around with you. Like you call it pocket money. That seems to be quite a bit.
So what happens when you don't open that wallet?
Because you have to have multiple duffel bags.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more than carrying around money. But, that is a ton of money.
It is.
Who keeps over $500,000 inside their house? I guess if you were super rich, I don't know, maybe you got one of those big fancy safes with the infrared beams that you have to do the somersaults across
to get to
it.
Stacked in all these different piles on the shelf.
Maybe. But that is a boatload of money.
It is.
Canines indicated what was described as a narcotics odor coming from the money. According to MLive, the police found over a dozen cell phones inside Lattner's home, and they seized 3 of them. The filing also states that Lattner was uncooperative, cursed at the detectives, and refused to accompany officers to the Warren Police Department when they arrived at the scene.
I wonder why they only took 3 of the dozen phones.
I don't know.
Always makes me wonder when you see something like that.
Yeah, there must have been some reason why those 3 stood out. But let's look at all of this, right? In totality, you got a boatload of money that dogs are sniffing narcotics on. You have over a dozen cell phones. I mean, you just put all of those things together and what do you get?
Some type of drug criminal operation.
Yeah. I mean, it screams drugs.
So it's 10 months later. He's got all this cash in the house. I don't know. Does it seem like he's grieving or just going back to whatever his business was?
Well, I can't tell from this information alone. I can't tell. Was he involved in a drug operation? We'll talk about it. But I think, whatever you do for a living, it's kind of hard to say that, this was his living, but I guess it was. It's how he made his money. Can a person grieve, but then still go on with that part of their life? I think they can, and a lot of people do. Because number one, you got to put food on the table. You have to have money.
That's true. I guess you're right. No matter if your job was legit
or illegal.
Yeah.
You can grieve and still go on with it, is my thought. And then at the same time, Gibbs, he's uncooperative. He's cursing at detectives. Now, that could have been because he knows that he's in trouble, or it could have been because, they were trying to link him to the death of Julii and he didn't want to say anything on either count.
Or the fact they're going to take that $500,000 and lock it up somewhere, and maybe that's money he still needs to pay somebody something.
And it came out that the day after Julii was murdered, on January 14th, the police searched Lattner's truck. And at that time, they found over $12,000 in cash, some marijuana, 2 cell phones, and a 9mm handgun with the serial number scratched off. It was also said that the truck had a hidden compartment. Okay, you got a lot of stuff there that's not good.
No, not helping your case.
2 cell phones, that's much different than 12. A lot of people have 2 cell phones. You might have a personal cell phone and a business cell phone.
You've got 4.
I have a number of them. You know what I don't have is $12,000 in cash in my truck.
No.
And marijuana. I don't have that. So a lot of things jump out at me here, but one that really does is, this handgun with the serial number removed. However it was, scratched off. That is never a good sign to law enforcement. So I'm actually kind of surprised that, this happens in January and then he's still at his house in October when they search it.
Yeah. Must just not had enough to do anything with at that time.
Yeah, maybe. But usually that's a pretty big deal to have a gun with the serial number missing.
Especially with somebody that's on lifetime parole.
Yeah, exactly. So it was reported that the police obtained this warrant to search Lattner's truck on the morning of the shooting after the neighbor made her report and after the scent dog tracked back towards the house. So we mentioned both of those things. Didn't make him look great. Lattner was questioned on the 14th when he came to the station to pick up his truck. His interview lasted almost 2 hours. The police searched Lattner's cell phones and found texts indicating he was involved in drug dealing, but investigators ultimately concluded that his activities were not related to Julii's murder. So, he was into a bunch of stuff that wasn't good, that was illegal, but they concluded that none of that stuff had anything to do with Julii's murder. Now, I'm sure he was still pretty high on their list.
Yeah, I'm sure they were going to keep an eye on, watch him for a little while.
Officer Brandon Roy reviewed the cell phone data and found texts between Terrell Lattner and his ex, Marcie Griffin. There were over 1,000 messages between May and December of 2016, most of which were sent by Griffin.
That's a lot of text messages.
It is, and it was said that most of them were hostile and derogatory towards Julii. The following are some of these texts retrieved from a 2022 court decision by the Michigan Court of Appeals. One said, "So you bring our son to sleep in that bed where that hoe sleep. Really? You walked out on your family chasing a rat hoe with zero potential. You put this bitch in a car before your own flesh and blood." Now, Obviously, they edit out the profanity when they do the some of the court documents. And you and I don't often use some of the words that we'll use in this episode, but I think when you're reading a text like this, you have to read it out.
Sure.
To get the full effect, because these text messages are so important to this case. Other texts showed that Marcie knew personal information about Julii. For example, in one message, she said that Julii got speeding tickets, had a suspended license, and no proof of insurance.
That's pretty personal.
Additionally, on January 4th, 2017, Marcie Griffin confronted Terrell at his car wash business. Lattner's nephew was there and recorded the incident. He said he did this because Marcie was so angry that he thought she was going to hurt Terrell. At one point, Marcie said, "Y'all remember this conversation? Bitch, I'm coming. I promise you on my daddy. I'm getting you. I'm gonna hit you in your stomach. Fuck this bitch." Okay.
All right.
People don't hear me say the F word a lot, but again, I think it's important. I think it's important for the context, because you can imagine just how angry these texts and this recording make Marcie Griffin sound. I mean, she is angry.
She's angry that she's not with her child's dad any longer.
Or
yeah,
she's angry that he's with this new woman,
right,
Julii, and that she's interacting with her kids.
Yeah.
Or, whatever it is. One of Julii's family members told the police that Marcie had been stalking Julii for about 2 years. Julii's mom told WDIV4 that she suspected something was going on, but Julii didn't want her to worry. She said, "I knew my daughter was not happy. I know that. I'm a mother." And that's one thing I know for sure. Mothers know.
They do. We call it mother's instinct.
Yeah, I mean, and I do too, to be honest with you. I know when my daughter's not happy. I know when something's going on with her. Normally it's when she says nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
That means something's wrong. But, you also have this side of it where your child doesn't want to tell you something because they don't want you to worry. Is it because they don't believe it's really as serious as it will turn out to be? Probably. Don't let allergy season slow you down. Get common allergy meds for as little as $15 with GoodRx. So you and your family, pets included, can stop allergy symptoms before they start. GoodRx is free and easy to use. Just search for your prescription on the website or the app, compare prices, and get a free coupon to show your pharmacist. Save at over 70,000 local pharmacies nationwide, including Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Publix, Kroger, and many more. Check GoodRx before every trip to the pharmacy to save up to 80% on both brand and generic medications. And did you know GoodRx rewards you for saving money too? Join GoodRx Rewards today and earn points every time you use a coupon. Remember, GoodRx is not insurance, but works whether you have insurance or not. And it could be your insurance copay price. I've been using GoodRx for years, and I can't tell you how many times I have saved money even with my insurance. Stop allergies before they start and save big on allergy medications this season with GoodRx. Go to goodrx.com/TCAT. That's goodrx.com/TCATT. Once the temps start rising, I realized I was back in the same worn out rotation. Same tank, same shorts, same everything. So I gave my daily uniform an upgrade with Quince. Their pieces are easy, elevated, and somehow make me feel more put together without even trying. Like their 100% European linen shorts and dresses from $30. Luxe swimwear, Italian leather platform sandals, and so much more. The best part, everything with Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than what you'd find at similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middleman, Quince gives you luxury without the markup. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. I'm getting ready to stock up on shorts for summer from Quince, and I know they're going to be amazing because everything I've ordered has been of the highest quality, and the prices are amazing. Treat your closet to a little summer glow up with Quince. Go to quince.com/TCAT for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/TCATT to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/TCAT. During the search on the 13th, a pair of work gloves was found in a marshy area on a brush-covered trail leading to a nearby LA Fitness. On the 16th of January, detectives reviewed surveillance footage from an LA Fitness near the condo. The video showed an SUV pull into the parking lot shortly before the shooting. A man got out and returned to the vehicle shortly after the shooting. So one officer attempted to retrace the man's steps from the gym to the crime scene. The walk took about 7 minutes. The officer knew where the gloves were found and continued looking in this marshy area and ultimately found a 9mm Smith & Wesson handgun.
Potentially the murder weapon.
Well, I'm sure they thought it probably was. Meanwhile, Officer Brandon Roy got a search warrant for Marcie Griffin's phone, but the phone had no data from before January 13th, 2017, according to court documents. Now, you want to talk about suspicious. All of a sudden, prior to the murder, you have no data on your cell phone.
Right.
No text messages, no nothing.
Sounds like a red flag.
But her cell phone record showed that she received text from a 4616 number the night before the shooting and the morning of. Officer Roy got a search warrant for records belonging to this number, which was issued on January 27th, 2017. The purpose of the warrant was to get data, such as pinging location information from the cell phone provider Metro PCS. And police found out that the phone didn't start pinging until February 4th, 2017. The signal was detected in St. Clair Shores, Michigan, where a woman named Gloria Ray lived. Gloria Ray was the live-in girlfriend of a man named George Ryder, according to the Macomb Daily. Now, we said earlier that Marcie Griffin was in a relationship with George Ryder. There was a lot of conflicting information about this. So not really sure whether Marcie knew about Gloria or if Gloria knew about Marcie or any of that. An officer conducted surveillance and saw George Ryder leave the house. He followed him and was notified that the pinging data was following the vehicle. Ryder was stopped when he pulled into a car wash. The police blocked his car and ordered him to get out of the vehicle. According to the news outlet Voice of Detroit, he was handcuffed and the police confiscated his vehicle and 3 cell phones without a search warrant. The police took 2 cell phones from his person. There was a 3rd phone inside the vehicle. When George Ryder did not consent to this phone being seized, the police had the car impounded and then got a warrant to take the 3rd phone and search all 3 phones. Man, a lot of people in this story got a lot of cell phones.
I feel like I'm under cell phoned.
Maybe you need more.
I think so.
But then you'd have to pay for more.
I don't want to do that.
I know you don't.
Yes, I'll just stick with the one.
George Ryder complained that him being handcuffed, put in the police cruiser, and not allowed to leave constituted an arrest. He was uncuffed and left without his vehicle. One witness to the incident even said, "It sure looks like you're under arrest to me." The police claimed they were conducting a traffic stop, according to Voice of Detroit. The police searched Ryder's phone records and learned that on the morning of the shooting, Ryder's phone made calls to a 24-year-old man named Eric Gibson 4 times between 5 and 6 a.m.
It's a lot of calls in 1 hour in the morning.
Between 5 and 6 in the morning? Yeah. Ain't nobody calling me between 5 and 6 in the morning.
If they do, it'd be the only one in call. It'd be the one and only call they're going to make you. You're not going to answer anyway, but if you do, you're not going to be happy about it.
And they're going to be blocked forever.
Yeah.
But so probably not too hard to figure out that they're putting this together. You know, does this have something to do with the murder of Julii? The timing is right? These phone calls between 5 and 6. She's killed at like 7:30 a.m. Ryder texted Marcie Griffin at 9:16 a.m. The following messages were retrieved from WDIV4. Ryder says, "Good morning, sunshine. Today is a beautiful day. Friday the 13th. Marcie writes back, LOL. Ryder says, "I hope you understand. Marcie says everything about I understand.
So we thinking that's his way of saying
the job is done?
Yeah.
Well, I think you could read into it that way, especially when you kind of already know what has transpired. But I think if you just read it on its own with no context, I don't know what you'd make about it. You know, it wouldn't be that it's about a murder, right? If it was just read on its own. Cell phone data also showed that the day before the shooting, Ryder's phone was using sections of cell towers that included the crime scene and the LA Fitness. In the evening, both his and Marcie Griffin's phone were using similar towers in sections in downtown Detroit. Later that night, Ryder and Eric Gibson's phones used similar towers, suggesting they met in person. At 7:42 on the morning of the shooting, Ryder's phone used a cell tower near Coolidge and I-696. It took about 12 minutes to drive from LA Fitness to this area based on the time of the shooting and how long it would take for the shooter to get back to the vehicle. Police thought it was possible Ryder was at the gym during the shooting. So I've said it before, you know, the cell phone pinging information is fascinating to me. I know it's come out, I think lately that, you know, maybe it's not as exact as people once thought it was,
right,
but it's still a very interesting tool. And maybe technology has progressed that it's more precise now. I really don't know. Prosecutors said that the vehicle captured by the LA Fitness security camera was a dark colored Nissan Pathfinder. And it turned out that Ryder's girlfriend, Gloria Ray, was renting a Nissan Pathfinder. Eric Gibson was pulled over on January 12th, 2017, while driving this exact Nissan Pathfinder. So it's a lot of great information, right? I don't think they've put it all together, but some of the pieces seem like they're starting to fall into place.
Right.
It was also said that George Ryder had a photo of the license plate of the Nissan.
So basically showing that he was aware of this vehicle, right? Why would he have this license plate photo if he didn't know anything about this vehicle?
Well, yeah, he must have taken it. So he had to have been, you know, with the truck. Now, Eric Gibson, it was said, had a flip phone. So the police couldn't get, you know, very much useful data from it.
Yeah.
My father-in-law still carries a flip phone.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of them these days, but he's old school.
Yeah, my mom still had her slide phone before she passed away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the good old slide phone. You're like, wow.
They even make those anymore? She just had it for such a long time. She just had it
such a long time and didn't want to give it up.
On February 23rd, 2017, Marcie Griffin, George Ryder, and Eric Gibson were charged with first-degree murder. Eric Gibson was also charged with felony firearm and receive and conceal firearms, according to WXYZ Detroit. It was reported that Gibson's DNA was found on the work gloves that were recovered near the crime scene. At that time, he was already being held in the Wayne County Jail on unrelated charges. So we always talk about, you know, not being too hard to find.
Right.
Not too hard to find this guy.
No.
To arrest him because he's already in the county jail.
They knew exactly where to go.
The press was told that July's murder was believed to be a murder for hire situation, with Marcie Griffin being the one who enlisted Ryder and Gibson in the murder. According to the Oakland Press, Eric Gibson was never tied to Marcie Griffin, but he was linked to George Ryder. Ryder's girlfriend, Gloria Ray, knew Eric Gibson because he was friends with her son. Gibson worked for a company associated with Ryder and was driving the Nissan Pathfinder, which was a company vehicle. The two men were also captured together by security cameras buying items from Home Depot before the shooting.
Tying it all together.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, you know, they can't tie Gibson to Griffin. And I get that. They may have had no conversations whatsoever. Marcie may have only talked to George, and then George talked to Eric. It came out that George Ryder served time in federal prison for a drug conviction in the 1990s. He once had an ownership interest in the historic Fine Arts Theater in Detroit. This theater is somewhat infamous for its connection to 3 unsolved murders.
That sounds like an interesting case to do on Unsolved.
Yeah, I mean, we did I thought we did an unsolved case in Detroit. I don't know if that's the same one or not.
I can't recall.
It also came out that George Ryder owned a pair of gloves identical to the gloves found near the crime scene. So I think you would say for sure it's not looking good for these guys. Now, is there what you would call a smoking gun? I don't know. Is there a bombshell, that kind of linchpin evidence, or is it just going to be a mountain of evidence that kind of is overwhelming? But, let's go back to this fine arts theater. It first opened in 1914. In 1978, a man named Joe Jr. Foster purchased the theater. The Detroit Free Press described Foster as a reputed drug dealer known as Dodo, with significant real estate holdings.
Dodo.
Seems like a strange nickname, but if you're a big-time drug dealer,
you can be called whatever you want to be called.
Oh, I was going to go down the path of where are you going to put your money? Real estate's not a bad thing, right?
No, it's long-term investment.
It's usually good for everybody.
That's
I guess
right.
I assume it's good for drug dealers as well.
Good way to launder that money.
Joe Jr. Foster was fatally shot in front of his apartment building several blocks from the theater on October 11th, 1997. This was several months after he was indicted for drug trafficking and food stamp fraud. On December 30th of that year, Foster's girlfriend and business associate Bernice Johnson was also killed. Both of their murders remain unsolved. So I know we haven't done that case yet.
No.
In July 1998, Foster's daughter sold the theater to a corporation called TGR Group, which was led by George Ryder. In May 2002, Ryder hired his girlfriend at that time, Valerie Atikian, to get financing for renovations to the theater. In September 2003, Ryder's group sold the theater to Brava Entertainment, which was owned by Atikian and her partner, John Yusuf. Then in December 2003, Ryder's Corporation took out an almost $400,000 mortgage on the theater, despite the fact that he had already sold it.
Yeah, that sounds like a little mortgage fraud going on there.
Yeah. The Detroit Free Press reported that this led to fraud allegations. The mortgage lender somehow didn't know about the sale, and it's unknown where the mortgage proceeds went. Ryder returned to prison in June 2004 for violating the terms of his supervised release. He wasn't released until February 2007. On September 22nd, 2007, Valerie Atikian was killed inside the theater when she reportedly went to meet someone who expressed interest in renting the building. She was found dead inside one of the theater's restrooms. Detectives spoke with the Detroit News and said that Atikian told friends she suspected someone was trying to kill her. She was killed before she was supposed to undergo further questioning in the theater ownership case. Valerie Atikian's murder also remains unsolved. So those are the three unsolved murders, and we could do that case at some point in the future. The theater was only used sporadically after that. Well, there was 3 murders there, so I don't know how many people are clamoring to
purchase it,
to rent it
or to
out,
rent it, yeah.
For somebody's birthday or something like that. On January 2nd, 2016, Brava Entertainment sold the theater to TGR Investment Group for $267,000. So essentially, it was sold back to the corporation associated with George Ryder.
Yeah.
At a reduced price.
Yeah, they sold it to Bravo. Bravo sold it back to them.
And then they turned around and sold it for $1.3 million the same month to a pharmacist named Haney Boutros. That is a heck of a profit.
Yeah, it sounds like something's up.
Yeah, obviously there's something going on here. All of this shows that George Ryder was already known locally because of his involvement with the theater. It's important to note that Ryder has never been charged in relation to the unsolved murders. But I think as we were going through that, a lot of people would probably say who benefited from the murders. And it sounds like it was George Ryder.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying he was involved, but I'm sure people were making that connection or trying to make it.
Yeah, you think about how he sold that place, made the money off of it because of maybe some unfortunate events.
Yeah, he sold it twice.
Yeah.
And made money. The second time he made a boatload of money.
Yeah.
In March 2017, Juli's boyfriend, Terrell Lattner, was charged with felon in possession of a weapon and possession of a gun with an obliterated serial number. He's not allowed to have a weapon because of his prior drug conviction. So we're going back to that, right? I said, what was he doing out?
Right.
Well, he was charged. He pleaded the fifth when called to answer questions at a pretrial hearing for the murder case. On June 28th, 2018, a judge conceded that the trial for the three defendants would likely be postponed when George Ryder's attorney withdrew from the case. Ryder's new attorney told the judge he would be ready to argue a previously filed motion to throw out cell phone evidence. Ryder argued that his phone was illegally confiscated based on a Supreme Court ruling in Carpenter versus the United States that requires a search warrant to view phone information. And, we kind of said that, right? These cell phones, there was no warrant. You knew that was going to come back around once this thing got to trial. But after a number of delays, the trial started in May 2019. All three defendants were tried together. Before trial, the prosecutors argued that the cases against Marcie Griffin and George Ryder were circumstantial based on text messages and mobile phone proximity. At trial, the prosecution argued that Marcie Griffin hired Eric Gibson to kill Julii Johnson, with George Ryder acting as a middleman. According to prosecutors, Ryder drove Gibson to Juli's neighborhood and parked at the LA Fitness. Gibson took a nature trail to the condos. As Julii left the condo, he shot her 7 times, then tossed the 9mm handgun along the trail and returned to the vehicle. WDIV4 reported that prosecutor Eric Smith told the court this entire murder came about because of one woman's enraged jealousy.
They are correct.
Well, and you and I talk about motive a lot. Jealousy is up there.
Pretty high.
Pretty high.
Yeah.
Greed, jealousy. We see it time and time again.
You could hear the jealousy in her text messages.
And that's why I think they were so important that I wanted to read them, as they were written, even with the language. Now, there was an issue at trial, and that was a potential mix-up of DNA samples by the Michigan State Police forensic scientists. The Oakland Press reported that forensic scientist Jennifer Jones testified that the results of DNA testing on 2 handguns led her to believe a mistake occurred on the lab side. That is never good.
No, you don't want to hear that.
When, a state forensics person has to come out and say, we think there was a mix-up, because you know what it leads to. The defense is going to say, well, if that got mixed up, how can we trust any testing that was done by your group, this lab, whoever it was? Because of the possible mix-up, the MSP crime lab recollected and re-examined samples. They got different results when they tested the guns a second time. The defense tried to shift blame away from the 3 defendants by pointing out that the first test results pointed to Terrell Lattner's involvement in the murder rather than Eric Gibson. The police found that 9mm Smith & Wesson on the trail. We talked about that between the condo and the gym. They found a 9mm Ruger in Lattner's vehicle. Initially, testing showed that Lattner's DNA was found on the trigger and slide of the Smith & Wesson with no DNA from Eric Gibson. But the gun's grip showed Eric Gibson's DNA on it with no DNA from Terrell Lattner. And to me, that would be virtually impossible.
Yeah. So it sounds like the lab really messed up here.
Yeah. I think they admitted that they did. But if you just think about holding a gun, and obviously they said that DNA was on the slide, right? So you pull the slide back to rack the gun to chamber around. That's really hard to do if you're not holding the grip of that gun. So whoever did that and left that DNA had to have been holding the grip at the same time, in my way of thinking. Jennifer Jones testified that these results are inconsistent because the 2 spots where DNA was collected were so close together. They should have much different results, and that led her to think an error had occurred. Testing on the Ruger conflicted with the police's theory in the case. The first testing of the Ruger showed Gibson's DNA on the grip and handle, and none of Terrell Lattner's DNA. According to the Warren police, Jones wrote in her report that these results were inconsistent with the case facts as described by the agent. This gun was found in Lattner's vehicle, so it was more likely to have his DNA on it. Jones talked to her superiors and they decided that it would be best to retest the guns. And it was during this further testing that Gibson's DNA was found on both locations of the Smith & Wesson, and Terrell's DNA was not found on the gun at all. His DNA was found on the Ruger, and Gibson's was not. And that would make sense. That makes a lot more sense than the other way around.
It does. Gives some clarity.
Jones denied allegations from a defense attorney that she was pressured to get results that favored the police. She said they weren't aware of the issue until after she issued her report in June 2017. But, like I said, the defense is going to try to hammer that.
Of course they will. It's a great opportunity for them.
Yeah. They would be derelict in their duty if they didn't try to, poke serious holes in that. Jones also testified that DNA analysis found Gibson's DNA inside 2 gloves found in the woods near the crime scene. So in total, the trial featured almost 300 exhibits and over 15 witnesses. The jury deliberated over 2 days after closing arguments on June 5th, 2019. On June 7th, Marcie Griffin, George Ryder, and Eric Gibson were convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Julii Johnson. Gibson was also convicted of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. So, I think it's pretty obvious to me, Gibbs, that when it came down to the jury, they must have believed the retesting of the DNA. They must have believed in it.
They had to.
Or else they would have had reasonable doubt. But to me, it not only fits the narrative, it makes sense. Again, I can't make sense of one person's DNA on the handle and the other person's DNA on maybe the trigger and the slide.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. Now, is it possible that you hold the gun by the handle and I rack it and I pull the trigger?
Yeah.
I guess theoretically it could happen. It just doesn't make any sense that somebody would do it that way. One thing that I did find kind of vexing is these work gloves, right? The work gloves had Gibson's DNA in it. He dumped them in the woods. What were the work gloves for? Obviously, he wasn't wearing them when he used the gun.
Right. Because if he had.
Well, and I'm thinking work gloves might be a little tough to shoot in. The fingers are often kind of big.
Yeah.
Might not fit through the trigger guard all that well. I don't know what type of work gloves these were, but
removed them and
it just seems strange to have gloves, but not gloves that you use to make sure you didn't leave prints on the murder weapon. Even the smallest step forward can make a big difference in your financial future. When you open a Chime checking account, you're one step closer to a better financial future with no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Making progress has never been easier. I think we've all been in that position where we've had an overdraft. Well, with Chime, you can overdraft up to $200 with no fees. That's amazing. And they have over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. Make progress towards a better financial future with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/TCAT. That's chime.com/TCATT. Chime feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A., members FDIC. Spot me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Fees apply at out-of-network ATMs. MyPay eligibility requirements apply. Credit limits range from $20 to $500. $2 fee applies to get funds instantly. Crime checking account required. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details. True Crime All the Time is sponsored by BetterHelp. Folks, therapy can feel like a big investment, but let's think about the state of your mind. It's just as important as your physical health. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, which adds up really fast. But with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save, on average, up to 50% per session. With BetterHelp, you pay a flat fee for weekly sessions, saving you big on cost and time. And you get quality care at a price that makes sense and can help you with anything from anxiety to everyday stress. Your mental health is worth it, and now it's within reach. I've used the BetterHelp service for years, and I love the fact that, I can connect with a therapist in a comfortable spot in my home on my laptop. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/TCAT today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/TCATT. The news outlet Voice of Detroit spoke with George Ryder on June 12th in a call from the Macomb County Jail. He told the outlet, "Neither I nor Eric Gibson ever knew Marcie Griffin." He also said that the judge should never have allowed text messages from an unknown person sent to Griffin into testimony. When they seized Marcie Griffin's phone, the phone number I had was in her phone, but I did not have possession of that phone at the time of those messages. Police seized that phone from me later when they arrested me on February 4th in Roseville. So he's saying, yes, my number was in her phone, but I didn't have my phone at the time that those messages were sent. Again, buy it, don't buy it. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too jaded that I just don't hardly believe anyone anymore.
I have a hard time believing it.
I do too. On July 31st, 2019, all three defendants were sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. July's family made victim impact statements at the sentencing, as reported by Fox 2 Detroit. Julii Johnson, July's daughter, said, "I don't know what my mama did to you. I really don't, but I wouldn't wish that on nobody. Literally nobody." July's great aunt, Pamela Johnson, said, "What was so much hatred for? How can you, as a human being, have so much hatred in you? To sit with no remorse, but you have to live with what you did. You know your role, your part in this, and you have to live with it every day." And to me, I think that's what the family hopes that these people have to do.
Yes.
They have to live with it. It's going to torment them. That probably makes them feel better knowing that it's going to eat them up inside.
Yeah, that they're going to have to sit there and dwell on it for a long time.
But I don't know that all of these people do. I really don't. I'm sure there are a lot of people who feel bad and have a lot of remorse about what they did, and it kind of does eat them up, and they think about it all the time. I also think there's a ton of people who couldn't give a rat's ass.
Same here. I agree with you.
That it doesn't bother them one bit, and that's a scary thought.
They're more pissed that they got caught and had to do some time.
And they still don't care about the person's life that they ended, or the family, or anybody.
They don't until it's time to come up for parole. Then they act like they do care.
Oh yeah, then they're remorseful.
Yeah.
Eric Gibson made a statement as well. He said, "My condolences to the family for their loss. I hope they find the person who committed this heinous crime. Michigan State Police and Warren Police illegally obtained my DNA and forced evidence against me to make it look like I committed this crime." And again, I don't know what some of these people are going to say. I mean, how does it help them to say, "I'm sorry, yeah, I did it," after the fact? They've already been convicted.
Right.
Why not go ahead and plan it out there that, I was framed, the evidence was doctored, this, that. What are they going to get out of it by admitting to it at this point? If they were going to admit to it, they should have done it up front and maybe got a lesser sentence.
Yeah, got some credit for it.
On November 21st, 2019, Terrell Lattner was sentenced to 3 years in prison after pleading guilty to being a felon in possession of a firearm in June. So he ended up getting 3 years. And yeah, I get it. He didn't have a role in the murder. That's what it seems like.
Right.
But he still had a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, he was doing a lot of illegal activity while on parole.
And what they got him for was the illegal firearm. I'm sure they couldn't prove some of the other stuff, probably not for lack of trying. I can imagine questions around, hey, where'd you get this $500,000 in cash?
Absolutely. Where's that coming from?
But the firearm with the serial number scratched off, that's hard to get around. While George Ryder was in jail awaiting trial, and during his trial, it was alleged that he conspired with his brother, Lawrence, and a man named Robert Reed White to conduct an arson insurance scam to collect over $100,000 on a house. And this guy just never stopped.
He's into a lot of fraudulent activity.
And that's just what we know about. What else did he do over the years to try to get money? It's just so weird to think that you're in jail, awaiting your trial, and even during your trial, still plotting how to scam money.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe he thought, well, I'm going to need that. I'm going to need to buy my ramen, my honey buns. I'm going to need a commissary bankroll.
Yeah, you will.
And this is the way we're going to get it. We're going to do an insurance scam. According to the Macomb Daily, a fellow jail inmate who was working with federal authorities was also involved. They were all indicted in August 2019, but Ryder's charges were dropped after he was convicted of murder. We had that in our Patreon case as well.
We did.
Once you get that murder conviction, I think the choice is made in a lot of situations not to move forward with some of the lesser charges.
Yeah, I mean, one, it's costly to the city, county.
Yeah, taxpayers ultimately.
But you also have to look at, the impact to the victims, if there are victims involved.
Sure. Yet another interesting detail in this case is that on February 16th, 2022, prosecutor Eric Smith was sentenced to 21 months in federal prison after pleading guilty to obstruction of justice. From 2012 to 2019, Smith took almost $75,000 from his campaign fund in a kickback scheme. He also tried to get a friend and 2 assistant prosecutors to make false statements. He was ordered to pay a $20,000 fine, undergo 18 months supervision upon release, and forfeit the money he received from his scheme.
There's a lot of tainted people.
That's what I was going to say. That, the other thing that jumps out at me about this case is like everybody's going to jail or prison for something. Even some of the people who we thought were on the side of the law.
Yeah.
The prosecutor's going to jail. On August 18th, 2022, the Michigan Court of Appeals made their decision in the 3 defendants' consolidated appeals. They affirmed Griffin and Gibson's convictions, but remanded part of Ryder's conviction for further proceedings. The court ruled that Ryder's attorney was ineffective because she failed to object to the warrantless seizure of his cell phone in February 2017. You just knew that was going to come back at some point, and it was almost strange that it didn't come up in the trial. That It was like this huge part of the trial, and here you have the appeals court saying it should have been.
Yeah.
And the attorney did a bad job.
Really bad job.
The court remanded the case back to the trial judge for an evidentiary hearing to determine if the confiscation of the phone met expectations to Ryder's Fourth Amendment rights, whether this evidence should have been excluded, and whether Ryder would have been convicted without that evidence. And to me, that's a big part, because you've seen in cases where technically law enforcement did something they shouldn't have done. But when it comes to the appeals court, they've made the decision that, okay, yeah, we acknowledge that, but it would not have affected the outcome of the trial.
The outcome still would have been the same regardless.
So no new trial, no overturn, nothing like that. The appeals judges determined that the warrant, which was approved a week before February 4th, 2017, was limited to the phone records of one phone, not the seizure of the phone. Officers took 3 phones from Ryder. According to the Macomb Daily, the court wrote, reading the warrant in a common sense and realistic manner reveals that it only authorized the procurement of data and records from Metro PCS. It didn't address the physical search or seizure of any phone. For some reason, the parties in the trial court took the incorrect view that the warrant not only authorized the recovery of the phone's location data, but also authorized the phone's physical seizure. On February 4th, 2022, the evidentiary hearing was held to determine if George Ryder would have been acquitted if evidence from the improperly seized cell phone was excluded from the trial, but it would be a number of months before the judge made his decision. In March of this year, Judge Joseph Toya ruled that the seizure of Ryder's 3 cell phones was reasonable due to exigent circumstances because the devices could have been destroyed if they were not confiscated. It seems likely that in the coming years, we'll see further appeals from these defendants. I think especially, around this cell phone stuff, the seizure of cell phones.
They're going to try to get it kicked out.
My assumption is George Ryder probably thought he had a really good shot about these cell phones. Now, what the judge said is kind of interesting, right? If they had not collected them, if they had not taken them, they could have, and I would say would have, been destroyed and, valuable data lost.
Yeah. Before the police could ever get their hands on them.
Now, does that mean it was right? I don't know. The judge is making this ruling. So, but what did we talk about last week? Wasn't it the word reasonable?
It was.
And now here it is again, the judge saying it was reasonable. Man, that is a word that crops up in so many true crime cases. And, to me, it's very kind of ambiguous. There's a lot of gray area in the word reasonable.
Yeah, I think so too. How you interpret that.
Yeah, because I think like I said last week, what's reasonable to you might not be reasonable to me. It might not be reasonable to my wife.
Right.
So I guess it only matters whether it's reasonable to the person that is ultimately making the decision.
That's a good point.
So you got the jury.
Right.
Regarding reasonable doubt. You got the judge in this case who's saying, yeah, I think it was reasonable. But as we wrap this one up, Gibbs, I want to go back to Julii Johnson. Obviously she's the victim in this case. Her life was ended far too soon. And because of what? Jealousy on the part of, Marcie Griffin. She was jealous that Julii was with her ex-husband, was with her kids, I guess. But as the jury concluded, Marcie Griffin was the organizer of the plot to kill Julii. And although she didn't pull the trigger, she was just as responsible as her accomplices. And I would say even more responsible.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I don't know if that's true or not, but kind of in my mind, I always think if the organizer or the instigator doesn't put it in motion, then it never happens.
Right.
So if you're talking about a murder for hire plot, if there's not somebody that is asking for somebody else to kill a person, that person's not going to kill them.
No.
It's only because they're saying, I will give you X amount of money, or I'll do this for you if you do this for me. So yes, you didn't pull the trigger. You didn't shoot the gun that killed the person, but being the mastermind behind the whole thing is really what made it happen.
Sure. Yeah.
Because without you,
it never would have.
Julii Johnson is living today.
Yeah.
That's my thought. And then I think you have to talk about Terrell Lattner a little bit. Like we said, obviously he was into some stuff. To what extent, I don't know. It doesn't sound like a lot of it was proven in court, other than the fact that he had this firearm illegally, and he got jail time for that. I don't feel bad about that, but I do feel bad that, he was kind of dragged through the mud, thought to have killed his girlfriend.
Right.
And he lost her.
Yeah.
So there is loss there, even though, all right, he might not have been doing, all the right things, but in a certain sense, he's still a victim in this case. He lost someone.
Sure he did. Yeah.
And obviously as well, her family and friends and all of that, that spider web that we always talk about, that it just kind of shoots out and touches so many different people.
Impactful.
Yeah. The other thing is that, we always say, okay, senseless murder. Is there a murder that's not senseless? I don't know what one would be.
Right.
But the reasoning behind this one,
Jealousy. Why kill somebody over being jealous? Your ex didn't want you anyway. If he did, he'd be with you.
you were married for 17 years, it ended. And I thought it was,
people have a hard time letting go.
yeah, I guess so. I was looking for the right word. I can't find it, but I can't imagine killing anyone for any reason, unless it was self-protection. I can imagine that if somebody was trying to hurt me or my family, but because you're jealous of someone, you're going to have them murdered. You know, what goes on in your brain when you're trying to formulate that and then ultimately making that decision?
I just think she was territorial with her husband.
Her ex-husband. All right, but that's it for our episode on Marcie Griffin. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Angel from Virginia. I just wanted to call in and say, hey again. I want to let you know that you all really helped me get through my work day. I put you all in, and I work on reports and stuff like that. Oh, by the way, I'm law enforcement, and I'm actually a special investigator at work, some of the heinous crimes that you all talk about. So it's kind of odd. I'm sure you all find it fascinating that I sit there and I'm working on typing up my reports and kind of like debriefing in a way while listening to you all talk about other crimes. So, I'm out here trying to fight the good fight, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm not one of the officers that you all talk about that didn't do the job right. So, guys, thanks for everything that you all do. Thanks for giving me some peace in the chaotic world that I live in. Just, keep y'all's time ticking, man, and work.
Well, we appreciate that message.
Yeah, we do. Appreciate you listening. Also, appreciate your service. Gibbs, we've always tried to back law enforcement. Now, obviously, there are cases where they make mistakes.
Sure.
And we have to point those out. And there's no way around it. But I do think it's a very important job. And like she said, she's out there fighting the good fight and trying to do the right thing. So
keep fighting that fight.
Hey guys, it's Jamie from Virginia. Once again calling because I have now caught up to where you are. I started binging May 31st of last year, and I'm finally through 300 and however many episodes you have. And now I've never been a fan of unsolved crimes, but I've ventured over there. And let me just say this. I love TCAT, but TCAT Unsolved, I love more. And the very first episode and even the second episode are wonderful. So if you air this on TCAT, you might have more listeners listen to Unsolved, because I myself never liked Unsolved. But you guys make it as great as it can be. So that's all. Hope you guys are doing well and stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Well, definitely appreciate that voicemail. It means a lot.
It does.
There's no doubt more people listen to TCAT than TCAT Unsolved for that very reason. There have been people for years call in or message and say, I just can't do the Unsolved. Now, me personally, I enjoy the Unsolved because you get to digest the facts, but also try to come to some of your own conclusions that you really don't do that much in the TCAT because it's finalized. It's been decided. There's not as much gray area to kind of wade through, but yeah, appreciate that.
The other interesting thing about TCAT Unsolved is some of them are already solved. Some have been solved.
That's true.
Since we've recorded them, and she's going to stumble across those and see that.
Yeah, actually quite a few of them have been solved, which is awesome. We hope they're all solved, but.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. My name's Kingman. I've been listening to your show for a while. I think I've listened to actually all of TCAT Unsolved, because I work the graveyard shift at a mill, and I got to have something to keep me busy all night long, every night. Anyway, I was just listening to your podcast about Michael Sanders. I always look up the people that you guys talk about, and I try to get an image in my head of what they might look like. And so I looked up Carmen Fisher, also the attorney that was, having inappropriate relations with him. And it turns out that she actually ended up marrying this guy, Garcia, who's like the head of the new Mexican mafia, not to be confused with the Mexican mafia. Ended up marrying this guy and helping him run the gang from behind bars. And she ended up getting sentenced to 3 years in prison just recently. I think she's out. I don't think she's a lawyer anymore, but she still shows up when you search her, and maybe her name is still on the bar list, or at least on the internet. She can't be a lawyer anymore, though, after serving 3 years in prison. Or maybe can she? I don't know. I don't know what the laws are in New Mexico, man. Anyway, you guys keep it safe. Keep your own time ticking. Situational awareness is key. Don't let anybody sneak up on you. All right. See ya.
Was that the Keg Man?
I don't know if he said Kegman, Kingman, or Caveman.
Man.
All
very cool, but the Keg Man?
Yeah, the Kegman is actually, that's what your nickname was in college, I know. Well, mine was the Keg Stand Man.
The Keg Stand Man, that's right.
So he kind of sounded like us there for a minute saying, I don't know what the laws in New Mexico are. We never do either. But that was interesting because I didn't see that in the research because I didn't go down the rabbit hole of where she was now.
Yeah.
But I wish I had because I would have included that in the episode. All right, buddy. We had no mailbag this week. So that is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Inspired by the hit Wondery podcast Against the Odds comes the gripping guidebook, How to Survive Against the Odds, Tales and Tips for Animal Attacks and Natural Disasters. This might just be the most important book you'll ever read. Go inside life or death situations where everyday people survived nature's most extreme scenarios, and learn how you can too. In these tales, you'll hear about the grit, willpower, and know-how needed to endure shipwrecks, alligator attacks, earthquakes, and more. You'll learn from experts, including top doctors, about what happens to your body and mind in life-threatening situations. Plus, important tips on what to do, and equally important, what not to do when faced with a situation that is truly against the odds. Go to survivalguidebook.com to pre-order How to Survive Against the Odds today and get the perfect gift in time for graduation and Father's Day.